Imagine waking up and before your feet even hit the floor, your brain has already automatically queued up this horror movie about your finances.
Oh, yeah, the morning spiral.
Right. You didn't press play. You didn't, consciously decide, hey, I'd really love to spend my first waking moments absolutely terrified about my retirement account. Or like obsessing over that one weird email your boss sent yesterday.
It just starts, you're strapped into the theater seat, the volume is blasted, and the projector is just, it's running completely on its own.
Exactly. And suddenly your heart is racing, your stomach is in knots, and your entire day is entirely derailed before you've even had a sip of coffee.
It's a universally recognizable experience, really.
It is. And that is exactly the reality we are dismantling today. So for you, the listener, the inherently curious person who is always, you know, trying to figure out the mechanisms behind your own madness,
Yeah.
you're in the perfect place. Today is officially Double Feature Part 2.
Yes. We're getting into chapters 12, 13, 14, and 15 of our source material today.
Chapters 12 through 15. And I'm going to make a massive promise right out of the gate here. We are not just discussing like abstract psychological theories today. We are handing you the root access passwords to your own operating system.
I love that framing.
We are going to completely deconstruct how you wake up tomorrow morning. But to do that, we have to look at the architecture of these systems that are running silently in the background of your life.
Right. And our blueprint for today is exploring what the source material calls the systems phase. So we're going to decode the mind as a digital streaming service, the physical body as a live updating GPS, and your emotions as an atmospheric weather system.
It's such a brilliant framework because you think about the times you felt just utterly hijacked by a downward mental spiral.
We're burnt out.
Yeah, totally burnt out because your mind insisted you had to just keep pushing. Or, think about that bad mood that ruined a perfectly good weekend. If you have ever felt like a passive passenger in your own life, this deep dive is specifically designed to put the remote control back in your hand.
So let's look at the software running that morning horror movie you mentioned. Chapter 13 frames human consciousness exactly like a digital streaming platform. Think Netflix, Spotify, TikTok.
It really is the perfect modern lens for consciousness, isn't it?
It is, because the core operating principle of your mind is basically identical to the algorithm of a social media feed. The interface of your mind serves you content continuously.
Just swipe, swipe, swipe.
Exactly. But the critical realization here is that you do not consciously control the algorithm's suggestions. Those thumbnails populating your mental dashboard, the anxieties, the memories, the sudden urge to buy a new jacket, they appear based entirely on your past engagement data.
So the algorithm isn't malicious. It's just brutally efficient.
Right?
Like if I spent 45 minutes yesterday afternoon obsessing over some embarrassing thing I said in a meeting, the algorithm just looks at the data and goes, oh, hey, we spent a lot of time on the social humiliation channel yesterday. Let's autoplay the next episode right as they're trying to fall asleep.
That is the predictive processing of the brain in action. The algorithm does not care about the moral or emotional quality of the content.
It really doesn't.
No, it doesn't care if the thought makes you joyful, terrified, or deeply insecure. It only measures one metric, which is engagement.
Engagement, right.
Your brain evolved to be a highly efficient prediction machine. It queues up Financial Panic Season 4 because you heavily engaged with Seasons 1 through 3. It assumes this information is vital for your survival, so it serves it up again.
And that leads directly to what the text calls the autoplay trap, or the Mr. Brightside loop.
Oh, the Mr. Brightside loop is such a good analogy.
It is. You get a song stuck in your head or like an anxious thought stuck in a loop, and the immediate, desperate human reaction is to try and violently force it to stop.
Right, like trying to blast heavy metal at 3 a.m. to shock your brain out of a sad mood.
Yeah, but does that actually work?
Neurobiologically, it is the worst thing you can do. Yeah, because when you try to violently suppress a thought or forcefully yank yourself out of a mood through sheer aggression, you trigger an amygdala response.
Yeah.
You are signaling to your nervous system that this thought is a literal threat.
Oh, wow.
What happens when you fight a Chinese finger trap?
It tightens.
Exactly. The psychological resistance actually reinforces the neural pathway. You are giving the algorithm massive amounts of engagement data, which practically ensures it will serve you that exact same thought again tomorrow.
Okay, but, if I can't fight the algorithm with brute force, what is the actual mechanism for taking back control? Because realizing my mind is basically TikTok is terrifying if my feed is currently a toxic wasteland?
Well, the framework provides 3 specific levels of curation to get that control back.
Ah,
The absolute foundation is level 1, which they call the skip button.
the skip button, okay.
This is the realization that you cannot stop the thumbnail from appearing on your mental screen.
So the thought is going to happen regardless.
Yes. The thought of your ex, the imposter syndrome, the memory of that failure, the thumbnail will render. But you retain the executive function to choose not to click play.
I have to push back on this a little bit.
Sure.
Because in theory, standing on the riverbank and just like watching the debris float by sounds very zen.
Sure.
But when my cortisol is spiking and my heart is hammering, skipping a thought feels biologically impossible.
It feels overwhelming.
It feels like the video has already autoplayed with the volume at maximum.
Mm-hmm.
I am not on the riverbank. I am drowning in the river.
And the authors actually acknowledge that exact friction point. When you are flooded with stress hormones, you are experiencing state-dependent memory. Your physical state is literally forcing your brain to recall terrifying thoughts.
Okay, so it's not just me.
Not at all. That is why the skip button is only level 1. It works for low-level static, but not for a full system override. To fundamentally change the feed, you have to move to level 2, the unfollow.
The unfollow.
Right. This is the active, ruthless removal of toxic sources from your ecosystem.
And this is both externally and internal, right? Externally, it's deleting the rage bait news apps.
Mm-hmm.
But internally, it's unfollowing the voice that says you're an imposter.
Exactly.
But let me challenge the premise of unfollowing entirely.
Yeah.
Isn't this just a recipe for toxic positivity?
How so?
Well, if I unfollow every external news source that stresses me out and I immediately dismiss every internal fear, aren't I just, hiding in an echo chamber of delusion?
That is a crucial distinction to make. But there is a massive biological difference between avoiding reality and protecting your instrument.
Protecting your instrument. I like that.
The unfollow feature is not about ignoring facts. It is about recognizing when a source is systematically dysregulating your nervous system to the point where you cannot process reality anyway.
Well, that makes sense.
If a news app is keeping you in a chronic state of sympathetic arousal, basically fight or flight, you aren't actually becoming more informed. You are just degrading your cognitive function.
So you're just panicking, not learning.
Precisely. And the same applies internally. Unfollowing the imposter syndrome doesn't mean ignoring your genuine areas for professional improvement. It means refusing to engage with the abusive, unhelpful tone of that specific mental channel.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. You're cutting the emotional manipulation, not the data.
Exactly. Which brings us to level 3, the active cue. This is where we transition from just playing defense to playing offense. We become creators, not just curators.
So how do we actually create the cue?
This relies heavily on neuroplasticity, specifically Hebb's law, which states that neurons that fire together wire together. The active cue requires setting the intention before the algorithm can autoplay.
Before you even pick up the phone.
Right. Before you check your phone, before the external world dictates your state, you intentionally feed the algorithm positive data. You cue up curiosity. You cue up gratitude. You are actively training the predictive machine on what to look for throughout the day.
So what happens when all 3 levels of curation fail? Because, let's be honest, they do.
They absolutely do.
You try to skip, you try to unfollow, you try to queue up a good morning, and you still end up spiraling at 2 p.m. What then?
That is when you deploy the 4-step cue interrupt protocol.
The cue interrupt.
Yes. This is the tactical emergency brake for when you are already binging the bad content and your nervous system is fully engaged. Step 1 is to name the pattern.
Which means actually saying out loud, like, I'm in a downward queue right now, or I'm watching the sadness channel.
Yes.
Why is vocalizing it so important, though?
It utilizes a mechanism called affect labeling. When you are deep in a spiral, your identity is completely fused with the feeling. The emotional centers of your brain are running the show.
Right. You just are the sadness.
Exactly. By forcing yourself to articulate the pattern in a completely objective observational sentence, you literally force blood flow back into the prefrontal cortex. That's the logical executive part of your brain. It creates a wedge of objective distance.
So saying, I am watching the sadness channel, completely divorces my identity from the emotion. I am not sad. I am just a viewer currently looking at sad content.
Precisely. Which leads to step 2, which is non-negotiable. Stop the current song. And this intervention must be entirely physical.
This was the biggest paradigm shift for me in the source material. Why can't I just think my way out of a bad thought?
Because you cannot solve a problem with the identical biological state that created it. Your brain chemistry is currently looping. The environment you are sitting in is acting as an anchor, cueing the autoplay.
So my couch is literally triggering the anxiety.
It can, yes. If you are paralyzed on the couch, spiraling about your career, you cannot logic your way out. You have to physically close the laptop. You have to stand up, walk to another room, splash cold water on your face, or step outside.
Just break the physical state.
Right. You are using physical movement to force a reset of the vagus nerve and disrupt the established neural firing pattern.
Okay, so I've named the pattern to engage the prefrontal cortex, and I've physically moved to disrupt the vagus nerve. What is step 3?
Step 3 is change the genre. This requires injecting the exact opposite energy into your system.
Opposite energy.
Yes. If your sympathetic nervous system is highly activated, meaning you are frantic, your mind is racing, you are panicking, you do not need a motivational podcast.
Right. That would just make it worse.
Exactly. You need parasympathetic activation. You need to play slow, ambient music. You need to engage in extended exhalations to manually slow your heart rate. You need the opposite energy.
But what if I'm in that, numb, depressed, couch-locked state where I have zero energy?
Then your system is likely in a dorsal vagal state. It's a shutdown response. Playing slow music will just push you deeper into the numbness. You need to forcefully inject sympathetic, high-energy vibes to shock the algorithm.
So that's when you jump around.
Yes. You jump up and down, you play high BPM music, you do 10 rapid jumping jacks, you forcefully wake the system up.
And the final step, step 4, is cue one better song.
You do one small positive action to feed the algorithm brand new data. Drink a glass of water. Send a kind text message. Do 5 push-ups. Make your bed.
Just one small win.
Right. You are creating a dopamine reward prediction error. You are telling the algorithm, hey, we are interested in this highly productive, positive content now. Serve me more of this.
Reading through this protocol, I kept visualizing what I call the DJ mindset.
The DJ mindset.
Yeah. If you think about your mind as Spotify, it's so easy to feel like you are just a passive passenger listening to an endless playlist on shuffle. Whatever plays, plays. But the cue interrupt protocol proves you aren't the passenger. You are the DJ standing at the deck.
Oh, I like that.
You control the volume, you control the skips, and you get to decide what the next track is. You might not control the drunk people yelling requests at the booth. Those are the intrusive thoughts, right? But you absolutely decide what goes out over the main speakers.
That is exactly the ultimate goal of the systems phase. You are the curator, the creator, and the DJ of your conscious experience.
But here's where the friction gets intense. I've tried the cue interrupt. My mind knows the right playlist. I've queued up the Crush the Day channel. But my body feels like it weighs 1,000 pounds. The hardware completely rejects the software. To understand why that happens, we have to transition into the physical realm, which is the core of Chapter 14, the body as a navigation system.
This is where we define the conflict between the map and the GPS.
The map and the GPS.
Yes. The map represents your mind, the conscious, planning, executive part of your brain. The GPS represents your physical body, the autonomic nervous system, and your entire sensory apparatus.
And the text highlights a staggering biological discrepancy between the two. The conscious mind, the map reader, can only process roughly 40 bits of data per second.
Right.
But the body, the GPS, processes 11 million bits of data per second. 11 million.
It is not a fair fight.
Not at all.
The map is entirely static. When you sit down on Sunday night and map out your weekend, wake up at 5 a.m., hit the gym, work 10 hours, prep a healthy dinner, read a book, you're drawing a map based on the past, assuming absolutely perfect, frictionless future conditions.
Yeah, the map assumes I am a flawless robot operating in a vacuum.
But the GPS is live updating. Through a process called interoception, it is constantly tracking reality. It monitors your energy levels, your ATP production, your stress hormones, the barometric pressure in the room.
It's tracking everything.
Yes, the micro expressions of your coworkers, the passive-aggressive tone of an email. It takes all 11 million bits of reality in simultaneously. Yet the modern world trains us to completely idolize the 40-bit map and brutally override the 11 million bit GPS.
The sources actually refer to modern society as a highly funded training camp for abandoning the body.
Which is terribly accurate.
It really is. And that perfectly describes what they call treadmill zombie mode.
We've all seen it, or been it. You are running 6 miles an hour on a treadmill, Physically, your body is engaged in intense labor, but mentally, you are staring at a screen, listening to an intense podcast, planning dinner, and stressing over a presentation.
You're completely disconnected.
You are entirely disembodied. You are treating your physical form like a piece of heavy, inconvenient luggage that your brain is just dragging behind it.
So what is the biological cost of that dissociation? Like, what actually happens when we treat the body like luggage and stare exclusively at the static map?
The result is chronic systemic burnout. Because when you ignore the GPS, you are ignoring critical recalculating signals. The GPS is constantly screaming, traffic accident ahead, low fuel, structural damage.
And what does the mind do?
The conscious mind just yells back, shut up, the map says we drive straight through this brick wall. You override the physical signals until the vehicle's engine literally catches fire.
To prevent that engine fire, the source material breaks down 7 specific reroute signals. And I really want to dive deep into these because I've spent my entire adult life misinterpreting them. I thought these physical sensations were moral failures or signs that I was just weak. But the text argues they are pure biological data points.
They are directional instructions, not character flaws. Yeah. Let's decode the biology behind them. Signal number 1 is physical tension. Clenching your jaw, hiking your shoulders up while typing.
I do that all day. What is the GPS actually saying there?
Your fascia and musculature are bracing for physical impact. The GPS is detecting a threat in your environment, even if it's just an intimidating email, and it is physically preparing you to take a blow.
Wow.
It is telling you that the route you are trying to force yourself down is too narrow. You are grinding the gears of the machine.
Okay, what's signal number 2?
Signal number 2 is exhaustion.
And this isn't just like, I need a cup of coffee tired. This is bone-weary depletion.
Right. This is a signal of allostatic load, the cumulative burden of chronic stress and life events. Your GPS is explicitly stating that the current route requires cellular fuel, ATP, that you simply do not possess.
It's an empty tank.
Exactly. If you do not pull over and refuel, the system will initiate a forced shutdown via illness.
That explains why I always get sick the day after a massive project finishes.
Exactly. Your body finally forces the shutdown. Now, signal number 3 is perhaps the most profound psychological reframe in the book. Resentment.
See, I always thought resentment meant I was just being petty or, holding a grudge.
Most people view resentment as a toxic emotion. But in this framework, resentment is an evolutionary boundary alarm. It is the GPS tracking your resource expenditure.
Tracking resources. How?
It tells you that you are giving more energy, time, or calories to the tribe than you are getting back. You are driving off a cliff of self-sacrifice. Resentment is your biology demanding that you enforce a boundary to conserve life-saving resources.
That shifts the blame entirely. The resentment isn't about how terrible the other person is. It's a structural alert from my own system that I am over-leveraged.
Exactly. It's biological accounting.
Okay, I love that. What about signal 4?
Signal 4 is dread or resistance. You look at your calendar, see a meeting, and feel a physical pit in your stomach.
Ugh, every Monday morning.
Right. That is cognitive dissonance manifesting physically. Your 11 million bit processor has recognized that the direction you are heading violently misaligns with your deeper offline values. The GPS is saying, this destination is structurally wrong for us.
It's rejecting the route entirely.
Yes. Now, signal number 5 is gut discomfort.
Like nausea, or your stomach tying itself in knots.
We have an entire enteric nervous system in our gut. It's often called the second brain, containing over 500 million neurons. When your gut hurts in response to a situation, it is pure threat detection.
So it's literally sensing danger before my brain does.
Exactly. The GPS has processed micro cues that your conscious mind missed, and it is telling you to proceed with extreme caution or turn around entirely.
Signal 6 surprised me. Restlessness or boredom? Because I always thought boredom meant I was just ungrateful for the peace and quiet.
From a neurobiological standpoint, boredom means your nervous system is idling too high. You have a dopamine deficit because the route you are on is vastly understimulating.
So I have too much energy for the task.
Right. You possess excess cognitive or physical capacity that isn't being utilized, and the GPS is demanding a more challenging path to keep the system engaged and healthy.
And finally, signal 7. Constriction or shallow breathing.
The classic anxiety chest tightening.
Yeah, the feeling where you literally can't take a full breath.
That is the vagal brake engaging. The system has entered acute threat mode. The GPS is prioritizing sheer survival over navigation. You cannot effectively read the map or plan your future when your biology believes a predator is in the room. You have to mechanically regulate the breathing first.
But I have to challenge the practicality of all this.
Let's hear it.
Because I can hear the listener screaming the exact same question I had. If my body's GPS says, I am exhausted, the route requires fuel you don't have, nap all day, but I have a mortgage to pay, I have kids to feed, I have massive career ambitions, do I just abandon my destination? Do I just lay on the couch and let my life fall apart in the name of honoring my GPS?
That is the ultimate tension of modern life, but the text clarifies this brilliantly. It differentiates between your capacity and your destination.
Okay, explain that.
The GPS rarely questions a genuine, authentic destination. It isn't telling you to abandon your business or ignore your children. It is desperately trying to find the optimal, sustainable route to those destinations so you don't destroy the vehicle in the process.
So it's not saying don't build the career. It's saying don't build a career by sleeping 4 hours a night, drinking 6 energy drinks, and ignoring your marriage.
Exactly. The GPS wants you to arrive intact. But there's a massive caveat here.
Which is?
If your GPS is constantly routing you away from a specific goal, if you feel chronic dread, physical illness, and deep resistance every single time you work toward that promotion or that milestone, you have to ask a terrifying question. Is that destination actually yours?
Oh, wow.
Or is it an internalized expectation from your parents or society or internalized capitalism?
The body knows when you're chasing a ghost.
It absolutely does. Which leads us to the concept of somatic wisdom, or offline maps. Because the body processes 11 million bits per second, it recognizes complex behavioral patterns that your 40-bit conscious mind completely misses.
It's that visceral feeling when you meet someone and, their resume is perfect, they say all the right things, but your stomach just clenches.
Trusting your gut literally means trusting the 11 million bit supercomputer over the 40-bit user interface. The body knows a situation is unsafe long before the prefrontal cortex can articulate the logic behind it.
It's incredible architecture. So if the mind is the streaming algorithm and the body is the physical car and the GPS, what are our emotions? What is the actual experience of moving through the world? This brings us to chapter 15, emotions as a weather system. And the core mantra here is something I want tattooed on my arm. You are the climate, not the weather.
It sounds poetic, but it is a deeply functional structural tool. Emotions are incredibly intense. They drastically affect your visibility and your ability to navigate the car, but they are entirely temporary atmospheric patterns.
They just pass through.
Exactly. They're just weather passing through the ecosystem of your nervous system.
And the ultimate trap is fusing our identity with the weather.
Exactly. We say, I am a depressed person, rather than I am currently experiencing a low-pressure system of depression. We fuse our core self with a temporary atmospheric anomaly.
I am an anxious person.
Right. But if you identify as the rain, you are going to drown. If you identify as the sky, you can observe the rain, knowing with absolute certainty that it will pass.
To understand exactly how these emotional storms form, the source material introduces a concept called dimensional homonymy. Unpack this, because it completely shattered how I view my own anxiety.
Think about the linguistic term homonym. The word bat can mean a wooden stick used in baseball, or it can mean a flying mammal.
Right, same word, different meaning.
Exactly. The exact same data, the letters B-A-T, has entirely different dimensions of meaning depending on the context. Your internal biological experiences work the exact same way. The text breaks emotional weather down into a 4-layer stack.
Walk us through the stack from the ground up.
Layer 1 is sensations. This is raw, uninterpreted afferent nerve data, your heart pounding, your palms sweating, your chest tightening. There is no story attached. It is pure biological electricity.
Okay, raw data, layer 2.
Layer 2 is feelings. This is how the body organizes those raw sensations into physiological patterns. The tightness becomes a feeling of constriction. The pounding heart becomes a feeling of high kinetic energy. It is still entirely pre-verbal.
And then layer 3 arrives and ruins the piece.
Layer 3 is thoughts. This is the cognitive appraisal phase. This is where your prefrontal cortex jumps in and desperately applies a narrative to the feelings. Your chest is tight, your heart is pounding, and your mind generates the story. I am completely unprepared for this presentation, and everyone is going to realize I'm a fraud.
Which produces layer 4.
Yes, layer 4 is emotions. The conscious state that emerges when the physical feeling violently collides with the mental story. In this case, the resulting emotion is panic.
But here's the genius contrast the authors make. What happens if you take those exact same biological data points, from layer 1 and 2, the pounding heart, the sweaty palms, the tight chest, and you simply change the layer 3 thought.
Imagine you are strapped into the front seat of a massive roller coaster, slowly ticking up that first huge drop. Your physiological sensations are completely identical to the panic attack. Heart hammering, palm sweating, chest tight. But the cognitive thought is, this is going to be incredibly thrilling.
And suddenly, the exact same biological data produces the emotion of excitement.
Yes, this is cognitive reappraisal. You do not have to fight your body's physiology. You don't have to force your heart to stop pounding. You just have to change the dimension of meaning. You change the thought, and you instantly change the weather.
But what happens when you can't change the thought? Because sometimes a massive storm just rolls in and no amount of reappraisal is going to stop it. I love the analogy the text uses for this. Picnicking in a hurricane.
It's very vivid. A storm warning occurs when a high-pressure system violently collides with a low-pressure system. In our daily lives, a high-pressure system is almost always external demand. A brutal deadline at work, a financial crisis, a sick child.
Right, and the low-pressure system.
The low-pressure system is your internal resource depletion. You only slept 4 hours, your blood sugar is crashed, your nervous system is fried.
So high external demand hitting low internal resources creates a Category 5 emotional hurricane. And instead of seeking shelter, we try to have a picnic.
We demand peak performance from ourselves during an acute physiological crisis. You expect yourself to sit down and write a brilliant creative report while your internal city is being ripped apart by a tornado of anxiety, and then you shame yourself for getting wet.
Why am I so unproductive today? Why can't I just focus?
It is biological absurdity. The text is urging us to respect the metabolic cost of the weather. If there is a hurricane, you do not plan a picnic, you take shelter.
Just survive the storm.
You drop all expectations of optimization and focus purely on safety and regulation until the storm passes.
Which brings up weatherproofing. We can't control the weather. I can't just forcefully decide not to be grieving or not to be anxious, but I can check the forecast and dress appropriately.
You track your baseline. If you check in and you are in the green zone, meaning your baseline is stable, your vagus nerve is regulated, your energy is solid, then you have permission to optimize. You can push yourself, take on complex challenges, go for the heavy lift at the gym.
But if you check in and you are in the red zone,
If your resources are depleted and you're highly reactive,
then what?
you must immediately cease all optimization. Your only job in the red zone is restoration. You put on the raincoat, you cancel every non-essential meeting, you lower the cognitive load, and you rest.
The text also provides a stark warning about two extremes of weather that require outside intervention: the drought and the flood.
Yes, the framework explicitly acknowledges the limits of self-regulation. The drought is a state of severe dorsal vagal shutdown. It is profound depression or dissociation where the nervous system completely powers down to protect itself from overwhelming pain.
And the flood.
The flood is the exact opposite. It is sympathetic hyperarousal, chronic panic attacks, constant adrenaline flooding, the inability to ever self-soothe.
And the author's very clear. If you are trapped in the drought or the flood, you cannot just cue interrupt your way out of it. You need professional clinical support. That is climate-level intervention.
A vital, life-saving distinction.
So we have this massive, intricate architecture. We have the mind's algorithm, the body's GPS, the emotional weather system.
Yeah.
But honestly, looking at all of this, how in the world do we actually run these systems in our daily lives without the maintenance becoming a full-time job? I don't want to spend 24 hours a day obsessing over my internal dashboard.
Which brings us perfectly to the integration phase in Chapter 12. Executing the systems and the manual override. The ultimate goal of this entire framework is not hypervigilance. The goal is automation.
The smart home trap.
Exactly. Biological and psychological automation is an evolutionary necessity. Your basal ganglia turns repeated actions into automatic habits, so your prefrontal cortex doesn't have to burn massive amounts of glucose thinking about them.
So it's saving energy.
It's like a smart home that automatically turns the lights on at 6 p.m. and locks the doors at 10 p.m. You want your workouts, your deep work blocks, and your sleep hygiene to run on automation.
But here is the trap, and I fall into this constantly. You become a rigid, robotic prisoner to your own highly optimized routine. You become so obsessed with the discipline of the automation that you lose all biological flexibility.
That is the danger of worshiping the map and ignoring the GPS. And that is why the framework introduces the manual override. A true smart home lets you manually flip the switch if there's an emergency.
Right.
If your automation script says, wake up at 5 a.m. and run 5 miles, but your body's GPS is flashing red, signaling extreme ATP depletion and an impending immune crash, you must pull the manual override.
You flip the switch and you sleep in. But let me push back, because the line between resting and quitting is incredibly blurry. How do I know I'm pulling the override for protection and not just because I'm feeling lazy and the bed is warm?
Yeah. That requires cultivating deep interoceptive accuracy. The text makes a crucial distinction. The override is for protection, not avoidance.
Protection, not avoidance.
You pull the override because you have a fever or because your allostatic load is maxed out. You do not pull it simply to avoid the temporary discomfort of effort. Learning the physical sensation of the difference between resistance, which you must push through, and depletion, which requires an override, is the hallmark of mastery.
To help us achieve that mastery, the sources introduce this cognitive martial arts move called the inversion kick, and it centers on the balance between context and content. We need to unpack the jargon here because the authors use some mathematical terms. R1V and AV1. Break this down.
The authors use mathematical variables to strip away morality and focus purely on system dynamics. Think about your daily life, the emails, the specific arguments, the endless to-do lists, the traffic. That is the content.
Okay, the daily noise.
When you get completely lost in the weeds of the content, you become what the text calls a responsive variable, or an R1V.
Meaning, I am just a variable reacting to the environment's equation. The world sets the temperature, and I'm just a passive thermometer going up and down based on whatever email I just read.
Exactly. You lose all structural autonomy. The inversion kick is the mental maneuver of aggressively zooming out from the content to reconnect with the context.
The context being the big picture.
The context is the structural why. Why are you in this career? What are your core values? What is the ultimate destination your GPS is tracking toward?
Zooming out from the annoying client email to remember that I actually deeply value the business I'm building.
Yes. When you execute the inversion kick and anchor yourself in the context, you transition from being an R1V to being an autonomous variable in AV1. You define the equation. You are no longer just reacting to the weather. You become an autonomous generator of your own climate. You bring your own weather to the room.
Okay, I love the theory, but let's get our hands dirty. How do we execute this practically? The source material offers a 5-minute integrated life dashboard, a daily pre-flight checklist, and I have bravely or foolishly volunteered to do a live feed audit based on my actual morning routine today to show the listener exactly how this works.
I love this. Let's run the diagnostic. Step 1 of the pre-flight checklist is streaming. What is queued up in your mind? Host, take me to this morning. Your eyes open. You are still in bed. What was the very first thing you actively queued up in your mind today?
Well, the alarm went off on my phone. I reached over to turn it off. And immediately I saw a notification badge for Instagram, and right below it, an email preview from a client that looked mildly panicked. So before I even sat up, I opened Instagram, scrolled for 2 minutes, felt a wave of comparison watching someone else's vacation, and then opened the stressful email. Let's probe the mechanism there. Why did you reach for Instagram before the email? What was the algorithm seeking? It was definitely a dopamine buffer. My brain saw the stressful email, anticipated the cortisol spike, and immediately sought a quick hit of cheap dopamine from social media to brace for impact.
A perfect neurobiological assessment. But look at the result. Before your feet even hit the floor, before you establish your context or set your active cue, you handed the remote control over to external algorithms. You queued up social comparison and professional anxiety. You became an R1V instantly.
I let the world set the temperature.
Whew.
Okay, so step 2 is the GPS. What is the physical location, fuel gauge, and energy level?
When you read that panicked client email while still lying in bed, what did your hardware do?
My shoulders instantly hiked up toward my ears. My breathing got shallow and trapped in my upper chest. My jaw clenched. I went into immediate physical bracing, and my fuel gauge felt instantly depleted, like I was starting the day with a massive energy deficit.
So your GPS was flashing threat warnings and signaling tension, which leads to step 3, weather. What was the emotional forecast based on the collision of your streaming and your GPS?
High external demand from the client, colliding with incredibly low internal resources because my body was literally still waking up. The result was an immediate Category 3 hurricane of anxiety. I was picnicking in a hurricane before I even made coffee.
And this is where step 4 comes in, utilizing the gaming framework. How do you integrate this? Do you shame yourself for a dysregulated morning, further draining your ATP? Or do you view it through the lens of a game?
Right. I have to view that stressful client email and my own poor morning routine not as a punishment from the universe, but as an XP farm. It's an opportunity to level up my boundary setting stats and practice the cue interrupt.
Exactly. In 5 minutes, by deeply auditing your streaming, your GPS, your weather, and your gaming integration, you regain root access. You took a morning that was spiraling into passive reactive anxiety, and you used the inversion kick to become an AV1 again.
It is a monumental shift in perspective. Think about the ground we have covered today. We have deconstructed the mind's predictive streaming algorithm and learned how to curate the feed. We have decoded the 11 million-bit physical GPS and learned to honor its reroute signals to avoid engine failure. And we have learned how to stop fighting the emotional weather, understanding the deep biology of dimensional homotomy.
You are walking away with the administrative passwords to your own nervous system.
But we want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought. Something from the very end of the source material that expands this entire framework far beyond the boundaries of individual self-help.
It is the concept of relational resonance and contagion. Everything we have discussed today, curating your mental feed, honoring your physical capacity, managing your emotional weather, feels very solitary. It feels like an individual pursuit. But biologically, you are not an isolated system. You are part of a massive, living, breathing ecosystem.
The text points out the profound science of emotional contagion. Our nervous systems are literally broadcasting to each other at all times.
Through mirror neurons and a process called neuroception, your internal state continuously alters the environment. When you walk into a room, your physiological regulation or your dysregulation measurably impacts the heart rates, the breathing patterns, and the stress hormones of everyone around you.
Which means the stakes are so much higher than just feeling better yourself. When you use the cue interrupt to stop an anxiety spiral, when you listen to your GPS and pull the manual override to rest instead of snapping at your partner, when you accurately label your internal weather instead of projecting a hurricane onto your coworkers, you aren't just saving yourself.
You are actively changing the frequency of the Wi-Fi for everyone in your network. By taking rigorous responsibility for your own operating system, you become a source of co-regulation. You become the living update that helps patch the psychological bugs in the people around you.
You become the living update. So here is our ultimate challenge to you, the listener. Tomorrow morning, before your feet hit the floor, before you let the external algorithm hijack your screen and dictate your state, try the 5-minute pre-flight checklist. Audit your streaming, listen to your GPS, check your weather, take hold of the remote control, and consciously decide what channel you are going to broadcast to the world.
Become the autonomous architect of your own climate.
Because remember, you aren't just a broken machine waiting for a mechanical fix. You are alive, dynamic, and constantly recalculating. The remote is in your hand. What are you going to play next? Thanks for joining on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.